So ego is a massive question for many people, and especially those on maybe a spiritual awakening journey and moving towards the dissolution of ego. But there's a lot of confusion over what ego is, and a lot of people are out there considering ego as some sort of nemesis, some sort of voice in your mind that is leading you astray and that is actively trying to be the arbiter of your downfall. So it's a really interesting question of what is ego, and if I understand what ego is, how do I go about dissolving it so that it doesn't affect my life and it doesn't limit my possibilities? Because essentially that's what ego's all about. So in order to understand ego, let's first talk about what it actually is. You've been going through your life in a collecting ideas kind of way since almost you were born. So every experience is happening in front of you, and you have experience, and that can be people speaking to you, it can be the views and the circumstances you're in, it can be an accumulation of your sensory inputs, or it can be communications coming through your TV and social media. It can be anything that's experiential coming in to your being through your senses. And you as a being in this reality have the opportunity or the ability to create an idea about any of it, and your ideas will be polarized. So you'll decide this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, and you've been encouraged to do that since you were small. Ego is like a hard drive. It is where you store all of your ideas. Your ideas will be polarized, and you will think some of them are important, some of them are very true, even though they're just ideas and they're all subjective. And we can prove that by the fact that the person next to you has stored a completely different set of ideas and believes theirs to be true and theirs to be important, just like you. But ego is the storage medium where you have accumulated all of these ideas about life and about your experiences so far in it, and about the things people say and what you've done and where you've been. It is the storage medium where all of them live. Interestingly though, these ideas are not as inert, they're not a personality as such, but they're not as inert as a hard drive, because each one of them is now driving your words and your actions, and before words and actions there are always thoughts. So your ideas that you accumulate about the world, essentially opinions because they're subjective, are now driving every thought, every word, and every action and reaction. So in some ways ego is appearing to be active, it appears to speak. It may speak as the voice in your head, because when you hear your thoughts about the ideas you hold, that's where you hear them. So you hear your ego as the voice in your head. But that is just the ideas you've accumulated. And the fact that it can have an argument in there and play both sides is just because the ideas weren't very well curated, and you can have two ideas that are opposites held in the same hard drive, and sometimes you'll hear one, sometimes you'll hear the other, and you'll hear yourself debating them. But ego is just the collection of ideas, but your ideas are the reason you are thinking anything, that you are saying anything, and that you're doing anything. So everything you do in your life is driven by the ideas you've accumulated. Just to prove it, and just like everyone else, you accumulated the idea to have breakfast at a certain time when you wake up, to have a shower maybe, to brush your teeth, to have lunch, and to have dinner. And interestingly, nearly everybody else did too, and now everybody is actioning that idea at roughly the same time of day, in roughly the same way. And they're eating even the same foods for breakfast, and the same collection of food for lunch and for dinner. And it's in a different culture, their egos are slightly different, and they eat different foods, and they choose different times, and they do a different thing, but it is the ideas that accumulated that make that happen. So ego and the ideas underlying it are driving everything you do, say, want, and think. And they are also governing every reaction. So you've got this stock of subjectivity that now runs everything you do. Why does that matter, and why would we want to dissolve it? Because that subjectivity is a collection of limitations. It's just everything you like and dislike is now limiting what you can experience, and it's also taking so much time for you to go towards the things you like and stay away from the things you don't, that you are ignoring the unlimited adventure of life. So ego is a confinement. It becomes a progressive prison. All of the ideas that you're bound into and all of the beliefs you are bound into that are becoming more true by the day and becoming more important are now acting as a confinement. Why would you want to dissolve it then? You'd want to dissolve it because you're not free while you're driven by the ideas you hold. In fact, the question as to whether you have free will is clear because you don't. And that's because your ideas drive every action, reaction, and behavior, and every thought. And if you were free, you wouldn't have to do the things your ideas tell you. So you're not free. And so as we start to look at what ego is, we realize that we have to commit to deconstructing it through removing the truth and importance in those ideas, because it's the truth and importance of the ideas that makes them actively force us to think, say, and do what they suggest. We believe they are true when we hear them in our heads, and we take action. For instance, if you've got an addiction and your thoughts say, I need a drink, what do? You take action. And that's just one of the ideas you could have in your ego. Your ego could be interested in food, it could like certain activities, it could be compulsive on other things, because the ideas you've decided to hold of the things you like are subjective. They're not the same as everybody else's, and now you have this compulsive need to take action in certain circumstances that other people don't have. Your ego is forcing you into a certain behavioral pattern, and their egos are forcing them into a different one. So ego is what we accumulate when we are in a melting pot of subjectivity, a society that shares its subjectivity. So it shares the way we live, it shares what you've got to eat or what you shouldn't eat, it shares the idea of a relationship or consumerism and things you buy make you happy and all of that. And all of those get stored in this ego, and then they become a program you run. So ego and the data that it holds is a program that you are running, and it limits every behavior you've got, where you can enjoy yourself, where you can't, and it dictates what you're thinking. And it actually is overwhelming you, usually, with all of the thoughts too. So as we start a process and find peace and remove the importance of the ideas within the ego, what we do is we find progressive freedom. And this is the awakening experience. It's often called spiritual, but there's nothing religious in that. It is just the connection with the whole that happens when the subjectivity and the noise starts to stop. And all we've got to do is take a progressive journey away from listening to our thoughts, away from giving them importance, and we dissolve the whole thing. And we can live in freedom from the ideas we accumulate, and we can also be free of the need to accumulate more ideas within that process. So losing ego is totally possible, and it's a commitment to losing subjectivity itself, because that's all that's stored in the hard drive.